in the ideology, the legends, because they do properly teach truth, without question. But I think the misunderstanding of Joseph Smith is that it was a religion, and it wasn't. It was a fraternity. And you wonder how the early Mason brethren, 11 of the 12 original apostles that were endowed were Freemasons. Makes you wonder how they could so misunderstand that Freemasonry is not a religion if they knew about Freemasonry. Well, they knew about Freemasonry. They were involved in it. There are Freemasons today. I have books in my Masonic library in my lodge that I've been browsing through. There really are Masons who still interpret Freemasonry as a religion. I honestly disagree with that assessment. And I'm going to show you some ideas tonight that shows that Freemasonry is just simply not a religion. In the very, very interesting book that my Masonic brother Joe Steve Swick III recommended this book to me, and I have never been disappointed in any of the recommendations by Brother Swick. Every book he's ever recommended I read has been stellar. So thank you, Joe, and I am reading this book. I'm not all the way through it yet, but I've got enough out of it that I can produce some information in these videos for you. This is by Christopher Hoffner, Workman Unashamed. This is the testimony of a Christian Freemason. It's by Lewis Masonic Group, 1989. He analyzes, as a Freemason and as a serious, Bible-believing, saved by Jesus Christ's atonement Christian, he explores the various relationships, themes, ideologies, and concepts of Christianity and its interpretation of religion as a religion and Freemasonry as a fraternity. And he interacts with many, many Christians who have argued against Freemasonry in so many different various aspects. And as a Freemason, he gently and slowly through the chapters unwinds the criticism against Freemasonry by Christians. And I think this type of analysis is a very excellent way for Mormons to come to a better understanding of Freemasonry, if that's your inclination. If not, don't sweat it. Don't waste your time learning. It's okay. Do something else. Go play some video games or something. Go read The Work and the Glory. Read the LDS fiction. Ay, ay, ay. The critics of Freemasonry are, and he says this, this is in chapter 5, under Theology, page 35. The critics of Freemasonry are determined to convince outsiders that it is a religion, but that it has an inadequate theology. Now there's Matt Brown for you, right there. That is a perfect encapsulation of Matt Brown's entire book about Masons and Mormons. Freemasonry has an inadequate theology. Mormonism has it all. And I disagree with his ideas on Freemasonry. I disagree with some of his ideas on Mormonism, too. But anyway, the officials of the order are equally determined that it is not a religion, and I side with that view. And because the discussion of religion is prohibited, it cannot develop any theology. So we need to examine what belief is enshrined and inculcated in Masonic ceremonial, and whether this constitutes a theology at all, adequate or not. Theology is not the same as belief. Perhaps the difference is like the difference between organic chemistry and cooking. Theology is much more complicated and abstract, but less necessary for existence. Theology is the science of religion, the study of God's nature, His attributes, and His dealings with man, according to the OED. Freemasons need not be upset if they are accused of having an inadequate theology. And in fact, it's very interesting that a modern theologian concerning his church he says, it's been suggested that the real conflict of the fundamentalist faith is not with critical biblical scholarship, but with theology. In a certain sense, fundamentalism could be described as a theology-less movement. What is intended by the theologian as an attempt to restate the gospel in categories that can be understood by the modern world is perceived by the fundamentalist as a quite gratuitous attempt to foist upon the church and the world the personal and professional fashions of a theological caste. I suggest that a better picture is given if we say that fundamentalism has doctrines. There are certain things that are taught, doctrinal structures, that are extremely important, but it's not necessarily to talk of these as theology. The picture given by Freemasonry is much simpler, and there are not even doctrines in Freemasonry, but a few simple beliefs. Now notice the assumption here. The assumption made by those Masons of the past who participated in the evolution of the ceremonial was that these beliefs were held by all men who had a basic belief in the Supreme Being. They could not therefore be the subject of a controversy within a lodge. The recently issued pamphlet on Freemasonry and religion expresses the view of regular Freemasonry. Freemasonry lacks the basic elements of religion. It has no theological doctrine, and by forbidding religious discussions in its meetings, it will not allow Masonic theological doctrine to develop. The official position of the Grand Lodge of the British Isles is this: the first condition of admission into and membership of the order is the belief in a Supreme Being. This is essential and admits of no compromise. So, a fundamental document in American Freemasonry is Mackey's list of ancient landmarks. These are principles which are so fundamental that to remove would compromise the structure of Freemasonry, and these have existed since the beginning of Masonic history. One of these landmarks by Mackey is a belief in the existence of God as the grand architect of the universe. Is one of the most important landmarks of the order. It's always been deemed essential that a denial of the existence of a supreme and superintending power is an absolute disqualification for initiation into Masonry. So modern commentaries on the landmarks, such as the former Dean of Harvard Law School, Roscoe Pound, maintain this as crucial, even when abandoning many others from the 25 lists of Mackey. The new Mason is quickly taught to address God as the great architect. The first charge, as promulgated by the United Grand Lodge of England since 1815, says, "Let a man's religion or mode of worship be what it may, he is not excluded from the order, provided he believes in the glorious architect of heaven and earth." Now that's interesting. Freemasonry excludes no man based on their religion. This is why, and I loved Paul Alexander's comment on one of my videos on my Facebook when I mentioned that the theme that does Freemasonry threaten Mormonism. Brother Alexander said, that's like asking, does Freemasonry threaten oranges? And he's got a fabulous point. Does Freemasonry threaten oranges? No, but it might threaten pears. There can't be any threat because it's not a competitor in a religious sense. Freemasonry doesn't threaten any religion. And I'm not just talking Western Christianity religion. I'm not talking just Mormonism, Catholicism, Protestantism. I mean Muslims, Buddhists, Australian Aborigines, African Zulu warriors. It doesn't matter what religion, Freemasonry doesn't threaten it. Because it's not a religion vying for converts out of a religion in order to join. It just says you must believe in the existence of the supreme architect of the universe. That's simply a belief. That's not a theology. It's not a doctrine. And it's not a specific religion. That cuts across the spectrum, doesn't it? This is one way Freemasonry unifies instead of divides. Because it's a fraternity of brotherhood and unity. It's not a religion of salvation. And that's an important distinction to keep in mind.